Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Kiana Mitchell, and I am the Partnerships Manager with Experience Columbus. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our last educational event of the year. We know it's been a challenging time for everyone, so we hope that this will be inspiring for you and lead you into 2021. Before we get started, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items. Everyone's mics will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat box. Following this event, we will be sending out an email with this recorded webinar, and you guys will be recorded for the duration of this. And I would like to introduce to you today our speaker, Mark Henson, Chief Innovation Officer at SparkSpace.
Hello. I am here and I am ready. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this with Experience Columbus. We've been members at SparkSpace for years and years and years, and so thrilled to help out in this way. I want to talk to you today about some work that I do around discovering your superpowers and what I call living a superpowered life. And I have this this presentation, this little kind of mini workshop here to run through with you called the 4 Keys to a Superpowered Life. And I came up with this year in particular because we have been in such a weird time, very strange year. And I wanted to do something that would help people kind of think beyond this year. And this is something that I think is applicable to just about any year, but right now is really applicable. So we're going to run through what I consider to be the 4 keys to a superpowered life. And right now, that means, you know, how do you take back control of your life? How do you improve your current situation? Maybe if you're in a role or a job, or maybe you don't have a job right now. How do you think about the future maybe a little bit differently and start moving toward that? So that's what the 4 keys are all about. And I'll explain what the 4 keys are. My own personal little housekeeping here. I will be going through this content and it's fast and furious. If you don't have a notepad, you might want a notepad right now. So grab a notepad and a pen, and you can jot down notes. I will also stop about midway through for a Q&A, but you don't have to wait for the Q&A to throw questions to Kiana in the chat box. So feel free to ask a question anytime. She's going to be monitoring those, and we'll stop for Q&A and answer as many of those questions as we can about midway through, and then we will stop for a second Q&A at the very end. And then let me just give you my email too right now. It's just mark@superpoweredlife.com, and you can email me there anytime with any questions about anything that we go through here. I will answer. My goal is to always answer emails within 24 hours. Usually I get to it a lot sooner than that. So just so you know, that's kind of where we are. Just to give you a little kind of brief idea of where I am right now in my own personal superpowered journey. As Kiana said, I've been running SparkSpace in Columbus for the last 21 years, and I founded it back in 2000. We've been running a very successful, very award-winning boutique conference center for business meetings for 21 years now. Actually, I say 21. We've been actually in business 21 years, but we really only did 20 years of business because of COVID. COVID actually put everything to a halt for us back in April of this year, and I just made the decision a few weeks ago to actually shut down SparkSpace permanently at the end of this month, which is a really tough decision to come to, but I believe it's the absolute right decision for me personally, financially. I've ridden this out as long as I can, but I also have like an excitement about the future. Once we get past COVID, I think a lot of good things are going to happen for Columbus and the rest of the world. And I'm going to be off doing other things like more work around my superpower work that I do. But SparkSpace is a chapter that is coming to a close. And that's all really part of thinking about these 4 keys to a superpowered life for me. So I am living and breathing this idea of how do I move toward a superpowered life, just like a lot of you probably are. So that's just a little bit about me. To max your participation today, I just have a couple of keys. I already told you to grab a notebook, so hopefully you got that. Take notes, and we're going to ask some questions along the way. We have a couple of polls. We're going to hopefully cross our fingers and hope that all works. And so if I throw a poll out to you, just answer that poll, answer that question, and we'll kind of see, we'll get a gauge of what people are thinking and feeling on this particular webinar. If you have questions, you can write them down as you think of them, and then when we do Q&A, you can ask those, or you can just put them in the chat box and take care of that as they come up, and then we will pile those up and answer as many as we can. And if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or email me at that email address, and I'll answer within the next 24 hours. And then the other thing I would just tell you is be present, be here right now for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Just kind of close everything else off. Close all the other screens on your screen, put your phone away, even take it off vibrate, maybe even shut it down for an hour. I mean, when was the last time you actually did that, where you focused on one thing for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour without distractions hitting you all over the place? I mean, we're right around lunchtime. I don't mind if you munch on some lunch while I'm talking, that's fine too. But close the door, tell the kids to go play, or turn a video on. I know parents don't like to do that, but just right now, give this gift to yourself of the next 45 minutes to think about you, your life, your gifts, what you can do moving forward in the world. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it if you focus a little bit. I can't see you. This isn't a Zoom call. This is a webinar. So I put my face on the screen so you can see me to hopefully create a little bit of a connection. But I want to know that you're there. I believe that you're there, and we'll get those questions in the chat and answer those as well, so I know that you're there as we go. So thank you for taking the time, and thank you for joining us for this today. I think it's going to be time well spent for you. So I want to start out by talking about this crazy world that we're living in right now. I mean, it seems like when it's just starting to get a grip on getting back to normal, like everything blows up again, right? We have been through the craziest year of my lifetime. I don't know about yours, but like, I can't remember a year like this ever in the 52, 3, 4 years I've been on the planet. It's crazy. We've had everything from civil unrest to an election, a crazy upside down election. We've had obviously COVID to deal with. We've had more unemployment than we've ever had. I mean, it's just piled up this year. It's rather unbelievable. So the world is changing, if you hadn't noticed. I mean, from this time last year to now, the world is dramatically different. And if we can chop up time into 3 big chunks, we have the past, which right now our past is sort of pre-COVID, everything leading up to last February, March, or this February and March. All that pre-COVID time that we considered to be normal. That was our normal life, right? And things were going pretty well for a lot of people. I mean, the economy was good. A lot of things were booming. My business, with the irony of shutting down SparkSpace right now, is that last year we had a record year, best year ever in our 20-year history. We broke every financial record, profit record, revenue record. It was going gangbusters. In fact, I bought a gong and we called it our big goal gong, because we passed like all of our big goals, and my whole team rang the gong, and then we all signed the gong, and it was a phenomenal experience. And that was in January. And here, less than a year later, we are literally going out of business. So the past has led us to a present that is just full of unrest and uncertainty. And even though we do have a little bit of an end in sight, we know these vaccines are coming. We know that the world is hopefully going to get back to normal, maybe sometime in 2021. There's still a lot of unknown. There's still a lot of fear. There's still a lot of unrest in the world. And it's going to take a while for all of that to shake out and settle down. And then, of course, when we look at the future is very uncertain for a lot of people. And the only thing we know about the future is that we are guaranteed a faster rate of change in the future than we've even had in the past. The only thing we know for certain is that everything is going to continue to change, and the pace of change, I mean, just look at the life that you've lived so far. The pace of change has just kept accelerating and accelerating throughout all of our lives. But now the pace of change, I think, is going to be exponential. The world is going to change faster and on a dime, on a moment's notice, like never before. Like it did this year. Even though a lot of that was out of our control, I think we're going to try to control things a lot more, and we're going to be enacting more and more change and making it happen faster and faster. So that's the way the world is changing. I don't want to belabor that too much, but I do want to know where you stand in this. So Kiana, if you can pop up that poll, I want to know, where is your mind right now? This might give us a little bit of idea of kind of where we all stand. Are you wishing for the past most of the time right now? Are you stressed out about the future? Sorry, that should be, there's two things about the future there. Are you stressed out about the present? We'll call that second one the present. Are you concerned about the future, or all of the above? So which one is that? Wishing for the past, present, or future? Where's your mind occupied right now? So we'll give you a second to fill that poll out, and then we'll get some results. Just consider that middle option, being worried about the present. So you have all three choices, or four choices. Maybe you are stressed out. I'll be honest with you, I'm a little stressed out about all of it. I really, I long for the past in many ways, because especially the immediate past, pre-COVID, things were going really well. And that was a really good time, and it was fun. So part of me really wishes for that. Part of me right now is my present is very uncertain as I close down my business and as I try to figure out what's next for me. And the future, of course, is a blank slate at the moment. So don't know what it holds. Excited about it, but a little stressed at the same time. So I don't know if we have any results, if the results will pop up on the screen, or if Kiana, you can read off the results to us.
Yeah,
I don't see any results on my screen, so.
I'd be happy to read the results. So about 56% of people are concerned about the future. 25% are concerned with all of the above, and 19% are stressed about the present.
Okay, nice. So not a lot of people living in the past, which makes sense. I think we've been in this now for so long that we're either like really kind of stuck in the present, or we're stuck thinking about the future, or a combination of those two things. So that makes a ton of sense to me, to see that poll the way that played out. So appreciate you doing that. Even though we have change, change always leads to opportunity, because change it gives us choices. Sometimes we're forced into change, like so many of us have been forced into change this year. But even within that change, we have potential opportunity to do new things, to develop ourselves, to take a different path. And even if it feels a little scary, or it's not exactly what you wanted to do, even in the middle of the most difficult the difficult times lies opportunity. And so that's what the 4 keys of a superpowered life, I hope, will lead you to today, is recognizing maybe some new opportunity for yourself as you move forward into your future. So now that we've talked about where we stand in the world for a minute, let's talk about what is a superpowered life, because this is called the 4 keys to a superpowered life. So I figured it might benefit all of us to define exactly what I mean by that. So let me pop a definition up here on the screen. This is my definition of a superpowered life. It's a fulfilling life spent creating, collaborating, and contributing to your world with your ordinary superpowers. And I'll tell you what I mean by ordinary superpowers in a second. But I want you to understand that this definition is wide open for interpretation. I want you to define this for yourself. What is a fulfilling life for you? Have you ever even stopped to think about that? If you had to define a fulfilling life, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What's involved? Who's there? What do you do? How are you living? How are you contributing? Likewise, the definition of creating, collaborating, and contributing, those are your definitions, whatever that means for you. Because your definition of creativity or creating things is probably going to be different than mine. And that's totally fine. Same with collaborating. Some people might think collaborating is this virtual world where you get to do everything virtually with other people all over the globe. Other people think collaborating is sitting side by side in the same room, creating things together. Totally fine. Collaborating could mean one person, it could mean a million. It's your definition, however you want it to be. Same with contribution. Whatever contribution means to you, it is your definition, and that is great. So this is what I mean by a superpowered life, a fulfilling life spent creating, collaborating, and contributing to your world with your ordinary superpowers. The bald guy on the right that you see kind of peeking in from the side, that's my friend Jason Tharp. And I put him in here actually as an example of somebody that I believe is living a superpowered life to the max right now. He is a children's book author and illustrator. And several years ago, he was working in the corporate world as a graphic designer, working for a big corporation, doing graphic design. And he was just completely unfulfilled, did not enjoy what he was doing. What he always wanted to do was draw cartoons. And it's what he had done sort of in his spare time for a long time. But several years ago, he decided, you know what, I'm gonna take a crack at writing children's books and illustrating children's books. And now he has like 15 children's books with all of the major children's book publishers because he pursued this thing called the superpowered life. He uses his ordinary superpowers of connecting people and positivity and his artistic ability to create that kind of a life for himself. And he's just doing phenomenal. And now during COVID, he's still been using all of his powers to create web content for people, and all of it's for free. It's just amazing. His website is look up Wonderville Studios, and you'll find Jason and all of the great things he's doing and all of his great children's books as well. So I mentioned I'd say what an ordinary superpowers are. Let me see if I can. Nope, can't get myself off the screen. But ordinary superpowers are those abilities that you already have within you. You already possess these things. And these abilities are the abilities that help you create positive impact in your life and the lives of the people around you, and then the world in general. And I call them ordinary superpowers because our top 2 or 3 superpowers that we have, our greatest strengths, very often do not feel all that super to us, because they're so hardwired into us, and it is how we have the most impact on the world. But because it's so natural to us, because these things are so hardwired into us, we devalue them. We think everybody has those same abilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. And that's why I call them ordinary superpowers. And I wrote a whole book called Ordinary Superpowers. And if you stay till the end, we're going to give away some of those books, by the way. So hang on for a few minutes for that. But I called it ordinary superpowers because I wanted to wake people up to how extraordinary those powers really are, even if you only think that they're ordinary. So I've got a whole big thing around that in the book, as well as a lot of the other work that I do. So now that we've talked about the past, now we've talked about what superpowered life and ordinary superpowers are, I want to talk a little bit about the obstacles that get in our way of living a superpowered life. And we all face these obstacles at some point or another, and the 4 obstacles that I've defined within this workshop today are the biggest ones that I've heard from people in the workshops that I do and the speaking that I do, and working one-on-one and coaching with people. And so I wanted to address these because if we define the obstacle, then we can start looking for the opportunity. And I'll share with you what I think the opportunity is for each one of these. And then there's a key to unlocking that opportunity. And that's where the 4 keys of the superpowered life comes in. So let's just dive in here. Let's talk about these 4 obstacles for a second. Obstacle number 1, it's the biggest one I see, is that people mistake their strengths for superpowers, or they don't believe that their powers are all that super. And when I say strengths, what I mean is your superpowers are strengths for sure, but not all strengths are superpowers. Does that make sense? Your top 2 or 3 abilities that probably stand out far and above everything else that you have you might consider a strength. The more that you can define those, the better. And we'll get into that when we get into the opportunity. Second obstacle that people run into is that they don't use their powers, or they don't know what they are because they've filled up their life too much with non-superpower busyness. We tend to get on pathways in life where we fill up our life with time and energy doing things that don't necessarily use our superpowers, even if we happen to be good at them. So that's obstacle number 2. Obstacle number 3 is you don't have a clear sense of purpose right now. Maybe you know what your powers are, but you're missing that sense of purpose, or maybe you're waiting for a calling that just never seems to come. So that's obstacle number 3 that gets in our way of living a superpowered life. And then finally, the 4th obstacle that we'll cover today is you're stuck in a loop, or you're stuck on a path because you don't proactively use your powers, even if you might have an inkling of what they are. You don't use them to create the life you want and to have the kind of impact that you want to have. So those are the 4 obstacles. So let's dive into these one at a time, and then we'll get into the keys. But I want to pop up that second poll right now. Which of those problems do you think right off the bat that you identify the most with? Your life is just full of busyness. You don't know what your powers are. You don't feel a clear sense of purpose, even if you do know what your strengths or your powers are, or you don't proactively use your powers to create the life you want. I'll give you a second to do that while I take a drink of my sparkling water. Looks like a commercial, doesn't it? Like I'm like, drink aha during your workshop. There you go. And Kiana, you can pop in and give us those results when you feel like it's slowed down enough. Oh, there. Now we can see them on screen. Awesome. All right. So I assume you can see these on the screen because I can see them on the screen. So the number 1 answer there was not feeling a clear sense of purpose. Totally get that. Know where that's coming from. And you can see that it's kind of across the board, spread out pretty evenly among the other 3. That's interesting because usually my life is full of busyness is the one thing that comes that stands out. And when I do that poll, but that has changed this year because people's lives have gotten significantly less busy this year, which I think is fascinating. I think it's going to go back to normal for most people once we get out of COVID quarantine. But right now, that busyness factor is a little bit less, which is actually a really good thing because now you have more time, if you'll take it, to do things like this, discover more about yourself, learn how to use your powers, find new opportunities for your powers, those types of things. So that lack of busyness isn't all bad right now. So let's dive into the 4 keys of a superpowered life. So remember, I said obstacle number 1 is that you mistake your strengths for superpowers, or you don't believe your powers are all that super. So when you define that as the obstacle, and you start looking for an opportunity, I think the opportunity here is that when you discover your powers, then you get to realize how awesome and wicked cool they are, right? And how powerful they really are and how much positive impact they have. So defining and discovering what your superpowers are is the key to unlocking that opportunity and getting past that first obstacle of just not even really knowing what those strengths are, those superpowers. So key number 1 is to discover your powers. Write that down. I need to discover my powers first. First and foremost, if you want to move forward in your life, I think it's really good to take inventory of what you're really, really good at, because then you can start seeing the opportunities. You can start sharing that with other people. And I think it's super important. Sorry, I use the word super a lot, but it is super important to not just discover what your ordinary superpowers are, but then to be able to very clearly articulate what your superpowers are to other people and to the world at large. Because when you do that, it's like tuning everyone's radar to the kind of opportunities that fit you best, the kind of jobs and tasks and roles and careers that you're going to excel in, that you're going to have tremendous impact in. So many people are in careers, jobs, roles right now where they might even be successful, and you might be one of these people. You might be successful at what you do, but you're doing it using things that aren't your superpowers. I started this work actually of helping people discover their superpowers when I went through a phase of my career here at SparkSpace where I wasn't using my superpowers anymore. I used them a lot when I built the business. And my superpowers, by the way, are my top three are exploring new things, simplifying stuff, and communicating ideas. And I used those three superpowers every single day when I was building the business till about 10 years in. And then about 10 years into the business, it had matured a lot. It had become profitable. It had become stable. And I worked with a business coach to try to figure out what's the next thing for me? What's the next level of this business? What should I be doing? And I was asked the question of what's your mission right now? And I answered the question to this business coach. I said, well, my mission is to build SparkSpace. And we happened to be sitting in SparkSpace when we were talking about this. And he kind of looked around the space. He said, looks to me like it's already built. So what's your mission now? And so I thought about that. And unfortunately, I answered the question the wrong way. I said, my mission now, I guess, is to manage and administrate this thing so that it becomes really strong and profitable. The problem is I am not an administrator or a manager. Those are not my superpowers. My superpowers are exploring new things, simplifying stuff, and communicating ideas. And yet I took on the role of becoming an administrator, manager of the business instead of the visionary sort of leader, builder, grower kind of person that I really am at my core. And what happened was I got really good at it. I got really good at something I didn't really want to do. Have you ever experienced that for yourself? Getting really good at something you just don't care that much about or don't really want to do? I mean, I love the business, but I didn't like that role. But I also didn't want to fail. So I learned how to do the role as best as I could, and I actually did it fairly well. We remained profitable. We grew more profitable. The place ran really well. I worked my ass off, and yet every single day I got a little more unhappy, a little more unfulfilled. The light started going out in my eyes a little bit. And one day I woke up and I didn't want to go to work anymore. I didn't want to come into this place that I built that I love so much. And, I'd always told myself that if it wasn't fun anymore, I wouldn't do it. And yet I did it for 8 more years like that. And I was miserable. Looking back now and through the help of counseling, I discovered there's a word for what I was experiencing during that whole time, and it's called depression. And I'm not joking about that. That's really what happened. My counselor told me I was operating in a long-term low-level depression. And so I will pause right here to say if you find yourself in that position where life is not lighting you up and your career is not lighting you up and things feel kind of gray, like for instance, when I saw those Claritin commercials on TV, you remember those commercials? They're going through the whole commercial and it's in color and everything, but at the end they kind of lift the corner of the screen and then everything is super vibrant and you didn't even realize how much color was missing. That was my life. Like I didn't realize how much color was missing. I was still operating, it was still functioning. I wasn't in this deep dark hole, but everything had sort of grayed out a bit. And so that was what counseling helped me do, was pull back that corner. So the combination of figuring out that I was stuck in this depression and then learning how to come out of that by focusing more on what I'm really good at, what I really love doing, what really lights me up, which is exploring new things and simplifying stuff and communicating ideas. I started focusing on that more and less on the administration stuff, and I had other people doing that, and life started to get colorful again. So if you ever find yourself in that place, don't hesitate to find help, professional help with a licensed counselor, and start focusing on the things that really light you up. And a key to that is articulating it to the world around you, because what the world sees, the world doesn't always see your superpowers. The world sees your production, period. You might have the most awesome superpowers in the world buried inside you, and you just never really use them all that much, but you're producing like crazy in your job or your career, and people see that and they think that's what your superpower is. And inside you're screaming, no, no, no. What I really want to do is this, but you never say it out loud. So learn to say it out loud. These are what I'm best at. These are how I can serve this company, this world, our family, our community. This is how I do it with these types of superpowers. All right, I've kind of beat that to a pulp, but that is, if you walk away with nothing else, those are the things I really want you to pull out of this little workshop today. So let's move on to the next obstacle and opportunity. I promise it'll go a little faster because that first one is just so important. I spend a lot more time on it. Second obstacle is that you don't use your powers, or you just don't know what they are because you've just gotten too busy in your life. Now, again, this year is kind of a weird exception, but the opportunity that lies here is that finding clarity about how you spend your time and your energy and your resources, when you define what that is and how you're doing that, then you get to choose what you let go of. You get to choose where you put your time and energy and focus. So the key, number two, to a superpowered life is to determine your presence. Take an honest look at where you are and your current capacity for change, because your capacity for change is limited by the amount of time and energy that you have to spend. If your life is completely full and busy, you just really don't have a lot of space to change. So we need to create that space if we want to move forward. So I use the word presence here on purpose because presence, if you look it up in the dictionary, it says something like this: something stationed in a particular place. So wherever your presence is, that's where you're sort of parked at the moment. So it's important to know where you're parked. It's important to know, is that where I'm parked right now, is it serving me the way that I want it to, or is it keeping me stuck somewhere that I don't really want to be? Your energy and your focus are both part of that equation. Very important to understand what your presence is. Now I'm going to open this up for questions in a second, and Kiana, you can get ready with any questions that have come in. If you have questions right now, this is a great time, but to kind of wrap up that idea of presence, present year accepted, when we're in our normal everyday lives, most of us are living with a full calendar. And one of the things I would suggest is to learn how to turn your calendar upside down. I call it reversing your calendar. When you look at your calendar in a normal year, okay, and maybe even for some of you this year, your calendar is full of Zoom calls probably now. But when you look at a calendar, let's say you get a brand new calendar, and in that calendar, you open it up and you see it's all just blank white space, right? Most calendars are white with a bunch of boxes on it. And you open up that calendar, it's all white space. Well, then what starts happening is people start requesting that white space. And you look at all that white space and you're like, well, it's free, so I guess I better say yes. And so you start filling up all that white space with other people's requests because it's free time, right? Well, when you reverse your calendar, you look at your calendar as if it's entirely blocked off. All of that white space actually belongs to you. That is your time. And so if you block it all off and say, that's all my time, now when somebody comes and requests time from you, then you look at it a little differently. Because now I'm not giving up free time that didn't belong to anybody. I'm giving up my time that belongs to me to do the things I want to do. And is it worth saying yes to that now? Because it's not free time, it's my time. One of the number one things you can do to free up more time for yourself is just block all of your time right up front and then reluctantly give it away, and be very thoughtful and purposeful about who you give your time to and what you dedicate your time to. I actually, every single morning on my calendar, if you looked at it, from 8 to noon, I have it blocked off, and I call it superpower time, because that is my time to do the work that I love doing, that I'm best at doing. And then I usually do other things in the afternoon. I take calls and meetings, and I do other things. I try to even do most of my client work in the afternoon if I can, because that morning time for creation and exploration and all of the work that I really love doing is so important to me that I just block it off. All right, Kiana, any questions?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions. The first question is can you give some examples of superpowers?
Yes. Superpowers are, you can look at those as broadly or as specifically as you want to. I gave you examples of mine, like exploring new things, simplifying stuff, and communicating ideas. Here's some actually examples from some other people that have been through some of our workshops. Uh, Heather, who's a vocal coach, she labeled hers as teaching and communicating, mentoring and nurturing, and planning and organizing. Those are pretty broad and can cover an awful lot of ground. And I actually think that's good, that they're not so specific. Now, maybe one of your superpowers could be like designing spreadsheets like nobody's business, right? And that's great, but that's very specific. And if that's a superpower, maybe you should back off from thinking so specifically about it and think about what is it about that you're really good at. And it might be something a little more broad, that's organizing vast amounts of information or something like that. And that can be applied across a lot of different things, not just spreadsheets. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me give you a couple more examples of superpowers, just so that you can see that there's no one way to really like say it or define it. Rick White, who is he's a business coach for people in the trucking industry. He defined his as content creation, presentation, and coaching people to profitability. Eleanor, who's a corporate leader, manager, trainer type person, she wrote hers out in more kind of sentence form. She said, keeping love at the core of leadership, simplifying complex processes, and organizing ideas. Another guy, Steve, who is an executive vice president, he said, I have the ability to take conceptual ideas and convert them to workable solutions. My boss, our CEO, is an idea person who generates ideas and forms partnerships to develop those ideas. I take the ideas, I work with others to develop well thought out plans to execute against those ideas. A little more in depth, a little longer definition, but I use kind of all of those as examples to show you that you can talk about it in whatever way makes sense to you. And I would try to keep it at maybe not the ground level specific task oriented ability, but maybe at that 10,000 foot level, looking down where you can apply those across a lot of different types of roles or tasks or whatever. Hopefully that makes sense. Any other questions, Kiana?
Yes, we just have one more question, and the second question is do you have some tips on how to articulate your superpowers to others?
First, define what they are, obviously, know what they are inside and out, and put them in your own language. Don't try to make them sound fancy. Don't try to make them sound like they fit someone else's idea or definition. Don't try to squeeze them into some role or job description. Just talk about them in your very natural language. Like I've used mine, exploring new things, simplifying stuff. I mean, stuff makes some people cringe. I think it makes my mom cringe. She doesn't like that word. And communicating ideas. That's just how I talk, right? So I'm gonna define it, and I'm gonna articulate those the way that I talk. Now you can go further and explain those, and I think it's always good to have supporting points behind that, because when I say exploring new things, somebody might ask me, well, what do you mean by that? And I better be ready to give that definition, that explanation. So for me, exploring new things is, I love meeting new people. I love exploring new technology. I love any sort of new environment that I've never been in before. I love to take those roads that go off through the country and just see where they go. I love to just think about things and explore even just concepts and ideas. So anything that has to do with exploration, and particularly if it's something new to me, then I have a lot of energy that I put into those kind of things. So having those supporting bullet points. Now, kind of a second part of that is I would say, where would you do this? Well, I would communicate my superpowers first and foremost to whoever is your boss right now. I would go in and I would sit down with them at the first opportunity and say, hey, look, I've been thinking about this and I've been going through this process of discovering what my biggest, most powerful, most impactful talents are. And here's what I've come up with. And here's where I think I'm using them in my role or in this company. And here's where I think I'm not. Here's the opportunity I think I have to grow and impact our team, our company, our organization on a greater scale using my powers. I feel like I'm underusing my powers and I'd like to use them more. I've been a boss, and if somebody came to me and said that, I would look for every opportunity to make that happen because they've done the work and they were passionate about it. And I know that if I can put them in a role that helps them do that, then we're all going to win. So don't be afraid to go to your boss and kind of lay it out. You're not putting any kind of ultimatum. You're not threatening to quit or anything like that. But I will tell you, if your boss is not receptive, if your boss shuts you down, if you don't work in a place that values what your superpowers are, then by all means, find somebody who does. I mean, life is short, and we can spend a lot of time on the wrong path because we haven't looked for another one. But I always think, like, make the grass greener right where you are first, and if you can, and if you can't, then jump the fence and go find some greener grass somewhere else. Any other questions, or was that it?
That's everything.
All right, let's get through these next two because our time is ticking away here. Obstacle number 3, you don't have a clear purpose, or maybe you've just been waiting for a calling from above, right? Like some of us have been waiting for this voice, this booming voice from above to say, hey, here's what thou shalt be doing with the rest of your life, right? I've been waiting for that voice my whole life. Like I grew up going to church, and in our church we had these missionaries that would come in, and inevitably people would ask them about, like, why did you get started being a missionary, in some other country, helping people do whatever they do. And these missionaries would say, well, I felt called by God, and I just kept hearing this voice, or feeling this tug at my heart. And so I grew up kind of believing that, oh, well, we're all going to hear that voice someday, right? And so here I am, almost 54 years old. I haven't heard it yet. So I'm still waiting for that voice. Maybe it'll come, but maybe it won't. But I think a lot of us wait for that, for something to point us the right direction, to tell us what to do. And then we think we'll go figure out how to do that, or what powers or skills we'll need to follow that purpose or calling. So the opportunity we have here is, when we discover our power first, then we get to choose what we do purposefully with that power. We get to actually choose our purpose. We've been looking at it backwards. Usually people look for purpose first, and then what power do I need to fulfill that purpose? But what if you looked at your powers first and then figured out, where do those serve the world best? What's the purpose of those powers? So key number 3 is to decide your purpose. Get clear about where and when to use your powers for the greatest impact right now. I'm a big believer in doing what you can with what you've got right where you are. And I think that's how most people create the most positive impact. You don't have to go to another country. You don't have to solve some world problem. Just start with your team, start with your family, start with your neighborhood, and see what happens. Where can you put your powers to the greatest use? So if I asked you, what's the primary purpose of a hammer, right? Most people would say, well, it's to pound nails. That's what it's designed for. It seems to be designed for. It's to pound nails. What if you don't have any nails to pound, but a hammer is your tool? Then what? Does it have any other purpose? Well, let me ask you this. You ever watch Chip and Joanna Gaines? What is Chip Gaines' favorite day? It's demo day, right? He loves to tear things up. It uses a hammer to do that sometimes. So on demo day, when you're tearing everything apart, a hammer is a tool of destruction. Now on construction day, it's a tool to pound nails and build things with. And there are lots of other uses for a hammer. I have used personally a hammer to dig little holes. I have used a hammer to help me throw a rope over a branch of a tree. Don't recommend, by the way, because what goes up must come down. Super dangerous. Do not try at home. I've also used it to hold down papers when it's windy outside. So it's a paperweight. The purpose is a paperweight sometimes. But the tool is the same tool. So that's the way I want us to think about our purpose, or our powers is, I have these powers. How can I use them in different ways, in different places, especially looking at right now? Like, how can I use them today? How can I use them this week? Especially if they're getting dusty and I'm not using them very much, where can I find opportunity to do that? Fourth obstacle and opportunity. You're stuck in a loop, or you're stuck on a path because you don't proactively use your powers to create the life that you want. The opportunity here is that when we create a plan, when we know what our powers are and we know what we want to do with them, then we can create that, step-by-step plan to get there. So key number 4 is develop a plan. Discover your powers, determine your presence, decide your purpose, and then finally develop a plan to put that purpose into action. So what describes you? Are you not much of a planner? Are you somebody who creates plans but you don't follow through? Do you plan almost everything and consistently follow through? What are you? Answer that poll. Just curious about this group. I'm in the middle. I create plans, but I'm not always great about following through. I'm great at the beginnings of things, but getting through to the end, not so much. I've learned some ways of coping with that, which I share in some of our other work, but yeah, that's still me. I create plans, but not always great. So we'll see the results here in a minute, or Kiana, you can share them with us. All right, yeah, so most of you are just like me, it looks like. So you create plans, but not always great at following through. So I relate to that. I think, I applaud you people, the 29% who said you plan almost everything and consistently follow through. Good for you. But obviously you're in the minority here in this group. And every time I do this, that is a minority. Most people fall into that middle category. Really good at creating, or at least thinking about it or wishing about it, but not always great at follow through. So I'm going to skip this next question so you don't have to pop that one up, Kiana. I came up with this idea that having no plan for your powers is like having a bag of chocolate chips, but no cookie recipe, right? My mom makes the greatest Toll House cookies because she just uses the recipe on the bag. But imagine the bag didn't have a recipe on it. What would you do? Well, you'd probably just eat the chocolate chips, which are great all by themselves, right? And I have eaten bags and bags of chocolate chips in my lifetime because there's no other sugar in the house. But cookies are generally better than just chocolate chips by themselves, for me anyway. So having a recipe is kind of important if I ever want to make cookies. Otherwise, I'm just left with chocolate chips, which are good enough sometimes, but not as good as a cookie. So I want the cookie. So we need a plan. Let me just give you two quick examples of a quick example of a plan here. This is a plan that I just laid out for you as we've been talking. Following a plan to use your powers could look like this: determining your presence, which we talked about, discovering your powers, deciding your purpose. And that is a very simple plan. You could put steps to that plan. You could put timelines to that plan, and then you could execute that plan. You could think, you could plan, and you could do. Simple enough, right? I have a process of doing that I wish I had time to share with you, but I'll share with you in a second how you could learn that process. Once you get to that point of you've figured out your purpose, then what? Well, then you could create a plan to execute on that purpose. That could look something like this. To execute a plan, a purposeful plan, you got to figure out, what's it going to cost me? What do I need? What are the resources I'm going to have to pull together? Who else is going to be involved? How am I going to take these next few steps? And then finally, like recruiting that help that you might need. Maybe that's one person, maybe that's 1,000, to execute on whatever purpose that you decide your powers have at the moment. So just a couple of examples of what a very sort of generic plan could look like. Executing on that plan, obviously a whole different story. So figuring out ways to follow through on that are important. Which leads me to talk about what's next. Now that you know these 4 keys to a superpowered life of discovering your powers, determining your presence, deciding your purpose, and developing a plan. This is like just such a high level overview. And I created this workshop this year that we're doing right here, the 4 keys, to get people thinking and get people sort of give them something to chew on and something to think about as you think about your future. And then people started asking me for more, like, well, how do we do all of this? Can we dive deeper on this? So I developed something that can help with that, and it's called the journey. And the journey is something that is a little bit of a commitment. It is a 4-week live workshop experience, and I'm doing the next one in January. Obviously, we're doing it virtually. Once a week, we meet live where we talk about these concepts of the 4 keys of a superpowered life in more depth, with more examples, with more meat, I guess, than I have time to provide today. And then we, every week I give you a tool to use before the next session where you get to dive in and really discover what your powers are and how to get your time and energy focused in the right way, how to determine purpose. I actually have a tool for that, and then a great tool to help you create a simple plan that is easier to follow through on for most people that need that. So this is actually starting in January. We dive into the 4 keys. We dive deeper, a lot deeper. I give you this entire toolbox. You actually end up with 6 tools that you use throughout the time. And the beauty of doing this over a month is you have lots of time to sort of dig in and really sort of experience it. And then we have discussions about it every week. And I've run 2 of these so far this year, and they have been phenomenal experiences. Like today, where I encouraged you to take some time to focus on yourself, now before the world starts back up full time, might be the best time ever for you to stop and dive deep into what a superpowered life looks like for you. So I encourage you, if you have the time and you have the interest, maybe this is something you should take a look at. And of course, since one of my superpowers is simplifying stuff, I want you to not be burdened by like some complex process. So I've simplified the process, and I try to make it as fun as possible for you. And it is a very energizing experience for everybody that's been through it so far, which is great. So here's my promise in this program. You will discover and articulate your powers. You'll learn how to do that, and you'll know what your powers are for sure when you're done. You'll find time you didn't think you had, and energy and focus that maybe you've never had before, because you'll learn how to focus your time in the right way. And you'll identify your purpose, and not only your purpose, but you'll develop a plan. So those are the things that you will actually do over the course of the 4 weeks of the journey. So here's everything you get. You get those 4 live sessions. You get recordings of the session. So even if you can't make it live, there's always a recording posted the next day of the live session. You get those 6 powerful tools. This is all housed in an ongoing membership site, so you have like unlimited access to it moving forward. I will send you 2 copies of my book, that one for you to keep and one for you to maybe give away to somebody else that you feel could benefit from that work. And then I give you unlimited access to me during this time. And what I mean by that is I will answer every question you have. If we need to hop on the phone, I will hop on the phone with you. I like to just, the people that are involved in this program, I give my undivided attention to over the course of the month, and even beyond if you needed it. And then lots of other bonus stuff that I throw in as well along the way. So if you're interested in this thing called the journey and doing these 4 sessions over the month of January, there's the website that you need, a superpoweredlife.com/journey workshop. Because you did this today and you stuck through all the way here to the end, if you use that coupon code 4KeysVIP. It takes $100 off, literally a third off. I'll tell you right up front, it's $299 to join this program because it is powerful and it gets you moving in a direction maybe you weren't thinking about before, which is something I think we all need at this moment in our history, right? So I'm giving you $100 off just for learning the 4 keys ahead of time. So I'll leave that up there. And Kiana, if we have any other questions, we got a couple minutes here for a final Q&A and book giveaway here. So Kiana, I'll let you either take it from here and ask whatever questions, or you can launch into the book giveaway, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so we actually don't have any more questions, but thank you so much for your time, Mark. This was wonderful, and I know I was taking notes, and definitely I'm going to work on a lot of the things for 2021. We are going to be reaching out to the contest winners via email to get your contact information, and then Mark will actually be mailing the book to you. So we'll reach out to you via email. And if you forget this website and you're not able to write it down, following this webinar, we'll be sending out an email with a link to the partner events website, and we'll have this link on here. Mark's contact information will also be on there as well. So if you have any follow-up questions that you would like to ask him or just getting in touch with him, that information will be there also.
Fantastic. And while we have 2 minutes left here, if you have any questions about the journey or anything else, put those in the chat, and we'll give you about 15 seconds to type out your question and fire it off. We won't make you sit and wait around very long, but if you have any questions, I would love to answer questions about anything we've covered today.
Yeah, so it looks like I have a question. It says, how do you get past all the excuses you make to keep from starting a plan like this?
Be clear about the plan, be clear about what you want. Make sure that what you want is truly motivating. Sometimes I think we're just very aspirational, and we look at things that we think we want based on comparison, based on what we see other people have or what we see on Facebook or the life other people are living. And so we define what we want based on comparison of what other people are doing, but it's not really what motivates us, right? So deciding what your powers are is one thing, but also understanding what drives you. What are your core values? What's really going to satisfy you in life? And then building out a vision of what your superpowered life looks like from that. You know, I've been going through this process lately because I'm transitioning to a whole new life here in a few weeks. And I had to go back and look and say, in whatever I do next, what do I want to make sure that includes so that I'm pointed the right direction and I can stay motivated toward pursuing that. And for me, it was things like adventure is really important to me. Making sure that I get to do new things and dive in, and that sort of sense of adventure. Autonomy is very important to me. I'm a lone wolf. I like to work alone. I like to do things where I get to create and I get to make decisions and I get to do that. That's why I've enjoyed running my own business, right? And authenticity. Like I could never step into another environment if I end up working for someone else or I join another project or team or partner up with people. Like that everybody has to be authentic in that. Or I just don't want to spend my time there. So I try to be as real and authentic as I can, and I want everybody around me to be as real and authentic as they can too. So those things are what drives me, and that's helping me define that vision of what I want to move toward, which will be far more motivating than if I just tried to replace my salary, or I just say, well, how do I find another job like the one I had? So I hope that answers the question, but getting really clear and making sure it's really plugged into like what drives you helps pull you through those times that feel more monotonous as you get through pieces of the plan. And then the other thing I'll throw in there, I guess, is part of the planning process that I teach in the journey is breaking things down, looking at the end goal of what it is, and then breaking things down into longer term things that need to happen all the way down to what do I need to do this week? If all I can just focus on is just knocking off the thing or two I need to do this week, every week I move a little bit closer toward that goal. And some weeks maybe I do it, some weeks I don't, but just chopping it down into the smallest chunks that give you those small wins along the way help create that snowball effect toward the things that you really want for your life. Any other questions?
No other questions.
All right, I guess we'll wrap up then. Thank you very much for your time today and diving into this. If I can be a resource to you in any way, just reach out to me, mark@asuperpoweredlife.com. Happy to answer your questions, happy to brainstorm with you if I can. I just want to be a resource to people. Whether you join the journey or not, doesn't matter to me. I'll be a resource for you no matter what. So just reach out if you need anything. And thank you, Kiana, for inviting me to do this.
Thank you.